real-life stories from everyday people in recovery, from mental health issues, trauma, substance misuse, and behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for links to social media and a range of books written by your podcast host, Bren Coy.
Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast. This episode is with one of my Patreon supporters, Anon, from Boise, Idaho, over in the States. It was a really cool conversation. He's a really nice guy, and I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking with Anon.
I was born in Korea, moved to the United States when I was about a year and a half, and lived in Washington, Colorado, Illinois, California. I've lived in Northern and Southern California, and then moved here to Idaho when I was probably in my mid-40s. Life in general was pretty good. My dad and most of his family are alcoholics, so we grew up in an alcoholic family. My dad is an alcoholic and is now sober, as far as I know. I've talked to him a few times, and I know he's sober now. Growing up, he had an army type style of discipline and behavior, I guess. So we kind of grew up very strict, very religious. We were Jehovah's Witnesses growing up. I am no longer. Just couldn't handle all of the rules, I guess, and but it did help me understand and try to be a good person in general. So having that background, I really do appreciate being a Jehovah's Witness, but it wasn't for me. The religion itself, and I saw some things in it that I just didn't like. So I am no longer one. But growing up, I started probably drinking. I think I took my first real drink when I was like in my 20s, and I felt invincible. I felt like I could do anything because I was pretty much that one kid that I know most of us identify with, is that kind of a loner. Didn't really have, I had friends, but wasn't really outgoing like all the other kids. So drinking for me was like kind of like, it gave me my personality, I guess. And I was even told that growing up, that once I have a few drinks, I become a happier, better person.
Who told you that?
Actually, my first wife did. She would tell me before going out to like having going out to like friend's house, she'll be like, why don't you have a couple so that way that you actually like talk to people and have like a personality.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't just stop at a couple. There was no way. I would end up just drinking and just destroying the night, So and then I think and then I got in some trouble. I got a DUI. I was pretty reckless in my early 30s, drinking a lot, drinking after work, driving home. driving pretty reckless. I'm surprised that I didn't get into any accidents or hurt anybody, which is kind of a blessing in itself. There's many nights where I didn't even know how I got home from drinking. And my first DUI, I had to do alcohol classes and go to AA meetings, and I did that for about 3 or 4 months, and I was sober for about 3 or 4 months, and I thought I had it pretty handled. And then one day we had just gotten done playing football, and I was a little sore and a little tired, and I'm like, oh, I'll just go get a 6-pack, and I'll just drink a few. Well, I ended up drinking the whole 6-pack that night, and it pretty much started all over again. I lived across the street from a bar, so we were stumbling distance from a bar. We would go there like maybe 2 or 3 times a week, get pretty crappy, pretty drunk. At that time, I was starting to smoke some marijuana in my 30s. I got involved with playing some disc golf, and that was pretty much what you did. You drank and you smoked pot. That was kind of the lifestyle of a disc golfer. So we partied a lot. I started my own business, and I started having more money, so I was able to do more of partying and drinking, and we would end up on a Friday at the park throwing disc golf, drinking a lot, and smoking a lot of marijuana. And that was pretty much, my days when I didn't, because at that time I was divorced from my first wife, and I had every other weekend with my son. So on the weekends I didn't have my son, it was party time.
Yeah.
Either at the park or even at my house. So
what's disc golf, by the way?
Disc golf it's just like golf, like with the club and a ball.
Yeah.
Except it looks like a frisbee, but they're different shapes, and so they have different sizes, different shapes. Some are for driving, some are for putting and stuff like that. So it basically follows the same rule as golf, but you're just throwing a disc through the air.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I'd still do it now, but I don't partake of the alcohol and the marijuana. So.
You're doing sober disc golf.
Oh yeah, and it's way better.
What about all your friends? Are they kind of on board with you being sober?
They are actually. Growing up, I mean, even when I wasn't really that sloppy of a drunk. I was always kind of a happy drunk, so no one ever thought I really had a problem. And continue like I've been sober now for almost 7 months, 7.5 months, and
well done, mate.
Yeah, thank you. They and my friends now are like, we never thought you were an alcoholic, and we still don't think you are. I'm like, well, just because you don't see it on the outside doesn't mean that I'm one on the inside, because there's a lot that you don't see. You don't know how I started my day. You don't know how I ended my day.
Well, and also, I mean, from what you were saying about your childhood, it was like the perfect storm for you to be an alcoholic, wasn't it? You've got alcoholism riddled throughout your family.
Yeah.
Then you've got moving around a lot, not feeling like you. I imagine you felt like you didn't fit in everywhere. You said that you felt, that you didn't have the character that alcohol gave you, so you came out of your shell when you drank. I mean, it's all the things that alcohol all the things that alcohol does for alcoholics, basically, is all there, wasn't it?
Yeah, like I've heard the analogy of like if it like you just missing that puzzle piece.
Yeah.
That puzzle piece fit in, and it was a part of my life from then on. And
Yeah.
I was not able to exist without it. Everything I did in life revolved around alcohol, whether it was cooking, whether it was I was great at every bar sport or bar game that there is. I was good at darts and everything else, cornhole, whatever thing that you can bring drinking in, I was really good at. And it ruled a lot of the activities ruled my life. Like softball was one of them. I used to play a lot of softball, and the weekend tournaments were just a drunk fest, and that's all I did. And I was addicted to that, and addicted to the alcohol, and addicted to the partying, and being. I think when I hit like my mid 30s and I started playing softball and I was good at it, I started feeling really good about myself, because up until then, I never really did feel good about myself until I was drinking.
Mm.
So those things brought, like an accomplishment. Like I felt finally that I was starting to fit in, and and everything was related regarding if I was good at softball or good at darts or good at this or good at that. It was all related with drinking, and I didn't feel good until I had a buzz with any of it.
Mm.
Like with darts, I had to get like they call it being being loose enough, or buzz enough to be loose to throw well. And so you would drink. When I was playing darts, I was drinking. I would start off my day. I have my own business now, so I would find an excuse to go to lunch, and my lunches did involve food, but mostly alcohol. So by noon, 1 o'clock, I was at my favorite little place to go get a sandwich and then get a bunch of beer. And then I would go to the bar, and then in my mind, I was resetting. So I only had like 3 or 4 beers at the bar or at my restaurant, right? And then I would go to the bar and start shooting darts. Then I would figure, well, I only had 3 or 4 here. But by the end of the night, I would probably have an 18 pack and not even realize it. And that was almost every day towards the end.
Yeah.
And I mean, it got pretty bad. I don't know how my body is still able to function. I mean, I'm 51 now, and I knew that the day that I decided to quit it was mainly for my health. I had some legal issues. I had some domestic violence that happened along the way, and I'm learning a lot through the classes that I've been going through, and therapy that I'm going through, and the podcasts that I listen to, including yours, that I've healed a lot of my wounds and realized what the reasoning behind a lot of my drinking was, and I've also learned to let go of the fact that I can't control people and I can't control life, that things are just going to happen. And if I take myself out of the equation, I can't get mad at that person. They're not actually doing, they're not, uh, their actions towards me I don't take them personally anymore, and I'm not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really important to recognize that the person in front of you is just doing what they're doing. They're not doing it necessarily to affect you in any way. It's just them being them most often.
Yeah, and you can't control their thoughts or their actions or anything like that. So once I learned that part, the whole alcoholism and wanting to run away and wanting to hide or being afraid of realizing that I don't need those things to cover up anymore.
Yeah, it's acceptance, isn't it? It's like it says in the big book, acceptance is the key, and it gives that, the big spiel about how we have to accept people, places, and things. And I live my life by that, because my peace of mind and my happiness rests on the fact that I do accept things the way that they are. And I mean, the caveat to that is don't accept the unacceptable. So, if something comes along, or if somebody starts treating you in a way that's abusive or whatever, then obviously you have to remove yourself from that situation in the most compassionate way possible. But ultimately, it's about accepting things and not having expectations of people and things, because expectations are just resentments in the making.
Yeah. Like there's things that float in my head, like from things that maybe what my dad like told me or not have done or this and that, or even the fact that my first wife told me that I needed a personality, so I needed a drink. And I those don't affect me anymore. Because they're their own person. They're gonna say what they're gonna say, and I can't take those things personal anymore because I can't control their thoughts or anything like that. So that was key to me and realizing. And one thing for me, I didn't do the AA, and that's just something that I just couldn't identify with. But I do have a higher power. I do have things that I look forward to, like nature and disc golf. Now that I'm sober, because I can be outside, I feel free. I can feel the sun, the wind, the birds, and be outside. So nature is pretty much like my higher power. And then I have two therapists. One helps me with some of my relationship issues, and the other one is my alcohol. So I did go to and complete 3 months of outpatient alcohol therapy, and I continue with that therapist on private doing one-on-one. So I do every other week check-ins with her, and with my relation therapist I also do that as well. And then I just hired a life coach and mentor who has gone and is sober. So I do weekly check-ins with him. And so with all of that and everything that I've learned, I mean, I feel so much better about life. My outlook on it is to be honest, uh, when I turned 49, I didn't want to live past 50. I'm 51 now, and I want to continue on. I want to live my life. I want to see my son grow up and be the best man he can be. He knows I'm sober. He's proud of me, and so are my parents, which means a lot. And so is my wife. She is sober as well, and I'm proud of her. So I mean, it's just been a crazy journey the last 7 months. And the day I decided to quit, I told myself I would never drink again, and I'll never become that person again.
Did you and your wife stop at the same time then?
Yeah. I celebrated my 50th birthday, and I celebrated it just the way I wanted to. I regretted the next couple days, of course, but I told myself after this it was over. I'm not drinking anymore, and I have not taken a drink since January. And believe me, there are days where I've wanted to just go to the restaurant and repeat that cycle all over again. And I tell myself not to even go there. So I make sure that I have food and everything that I need in my house. And I force myself to come here, make myself dinner or lunch or breakfast so that I don't get into that mode again of going out and seeing people drink and wanting that and starting that cycle again. And so I've learned what my triggers are, and so I basically just deny myself of those things, and it helps to just listen to the brain, the part of your brain that tells you what's right and what's wrong, not what tells you how to minimize and how to and what your emotions are and what you may need or whatever. But I listen to the brain that tells me, Anon, this is not the right decision. Do not go down this road. And it's tough. It's really tough sometimes. And I really want to take that drink. But I know that if I do, I'm going to ruin everything that I worked for. And I can't do that.
What was it that put you off Alcoholics Anonymous?
What's that?
What was it that put you off Alcoholics Anonymous?
I think, and this may be my own thought, I think it's kind of religious, and I'm really growing up being heavily in religion. It's just that part and having God or whatever, just and it may be different now, and I may just have just a theory about it, but it just didn't work for me. And this what I've been doing is probably unconventional and probably not what normal people do, but for me it works. And therapy and being able to talk it out with my therapist, for me, especially the one-on-ones, helps so much because I can have someone I can just talk to and tell them everything that I'm going through, and they've been there, they know what I'm going through, so they can help me as well and guide me in the right direction and guide me into thinking correctly, And I feel like a lot of it was habitual. I mean, it's just I fell into a hole, and it became a habit for me to go have lunch and start drinking and do those things and be in that arena of just being in a bar like all the time and drinking and drowning myself in those activities that only revolved around drinking. And so I had to change my way of thinking on that and find different activities that were going to be that didn't involve drinking. And I couldn't bring an alcoholic beverage to this park or go throw and carry all these beers with me.
I think ultimately, I mean, you said it's unconventional what you're doing. I mean, my opinion on it is that whatever works for you is what the right thing to do is. I mean, obviously I'm an advocate of 12-step fellowships because that's been the route that I took and that's what's worked for me. And having worked in the substance misuse field for the past 4 or 5 years and, working with people with their addictions and also, doing counselling qualifications and stuff, the conclusion that I've reached is that the genius of the 12-step program is that it deals with all those underlying issues, the past life trauma, the resentments, the fear at the core of addiction, and it helps you to overcome that, so that by the time you move through the 12 steps and you get towards the end, the idea is you've had a spiritual awakening or a psychic shift, whatever you want to call it, and the obsession for alcohol or drugs or whatever it is that you're doing the work on has left you. Now, if the work that you're doing has that same effect, then that's brilliant, and I hope that that's what works, and and I hope that you can continue with a sober life. I suppose all I would say, just from the perspective of a person who's been in recovery for a few years, is if you don't reach that place where the obsession or the craving for alcohol has left you, if you've still, if a year down the line, or I don't know, 18 months down the line, you still feel that kind of that creeping desire to want to have a drink, then maybe look at some other options, because I've known so many people that have never overcome that craving, and eventually the day comes where they just press the fuck it button and they pick up a drink, and obviously I hope that doesn't happen for you.
Yeah, I think with the therapy that I've been going through, and everything that I've gone so far, and especially now hiring my coach and my mentor, I felt, coming up into my 6 months of sobriety, I felt that I was getting a little complacent, and I felt that things were a little too easy, right?
Yeah.
I felt that I needed to get an extra push and look at why I was there, and so I go to domestic violence class, and that has wakened me up to a lot of the reasons of how I got there, how I got to this point of domestic violence. And I've also taken that notion and tried to review back how I got to my alcoholism and where it started, and all my trigger steps. And that way I can identify those areas, find out what might be that trigger. When I find that trigger or hit that trigger, part of my brain goes, hey, you're feeling this way. Let's do a change of thought, or let's try something else, or let's go disc golf, or let's go for a walk. So that way I can kind of clear that thought and not go down that road. So I think a lot with my therapy, it's helped me realize that I am not done yet. And by no means am I ever done with my journey, because my journey has only begun, and it will be forever. And I know that there are days I do crave it, but there are days where I don't even think about it anymore. And it's so freeing to me to not ever have to be. It felt like that's the only thing I ever thought about: alcohol and getting drunk and getting that next buzz. And it's so crippling. And for me now, I don't ever. I mean, there are certain days, certain stresses. Sometimes, yes, it comes up, and I think all of us deal with it. But it's all about how to deal with that stress, and finding ways of dealing with those stresses and moving on in a healthy way. And to me, it's like the first hurdle I did. There was a day where all I wanted to do is go get an 18-pack and just drink all day. And I went and disc golf for 2 days straight. I tired myself out. I fought through the thoughts of drinking, and that was like a hurdle to me. So in the back of my mind, I won. I
Yeah.
I leapt over that hurdle and I won. And I knew that the next time that that would happen, I knew what I needed to do and I would win again. And I kept winning and kept winning. And so now those hurdles are a lot smaller and I don't have to like jump over them anymore as much. And I don't feel like when I wake up in the morning, that crippling feeling of wanting that drink or wanting to get away from everything. I'm ready to face my day. Like I have with my mentor, I have scheduled of how my day is gonna go, and I already know that alcohol doesn't fit into it anymore.
Yeah. It's almost like a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, isn't it, really? That you're kind of replacing those thoughts of drinking with other thoughts or activities that aren't that are something more healthy, like going playing disc golf or going for a walk or changing your thoughts onto something else.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, it's interesting that, you know, the way you were talking about it then, there's definitely parallels to the 12-step way of living life. And I think that ultimately, you know, when you're dealing with the disease of addiction, which is primarily about obsessive compulsive thinking and obsessive compulsive behavior patterns that we feel like we have no control over, it doesn't matter which path you walk down in order to gain some control of those patterns. It's like I said before, it's whatever works for you, and it's really commendable as well that you're doing the domestic violence therapy, because, you know, I know that is something that, you know, I've worked with people that have been in those situations, both male and female, and I know how much shame and regret and guilt it brings up, you know, especially for the perpetrator. Often it tends to, well, I mean, not often, but sometimes it can be just one perpetrator, but often it tends to be from both parties, and it's really difficult to work through. So, you know, I imagine that is kind of really getting to the core of where all this anger comes from, and, you know, and how to manage that aggression and deal with it in a healthy manner.
yeah. I mean, I was never really a violent person, and uh, you know, growing up, I mean, even my nickname and for my darts is Mellow Yellow. So I was always just a mellow person, and you know, with alcohol, and I learned down the line. I learned some traits, some bad traits, and one was controlling,
Yeah.
and also learned that some of my beliefs were, you know, don't cross me, or, you know, it's got to be my way or this way. So with the domestic violence and the therapy that I'm going through with that, it is, I've looked back and found out places where those thoughts have started, and I'm dealing with those thoughts and going back to why I might have felt that way, and rethink out those things, and so that those things don't happen again, and I don't think that way anymore. And you know, learning to change my beliefs on a lot of stuff is the major thing about being in this therapy, and also being alcohol free. I mean, a lot of it goes in like hand in hand, and yeah, it.
Well, I can massively relate. I mean, whenever I put a drink inside me, I became super aggressive. And although I was very fortunate to never lay a hand on either a female or get into any particular fights with any males, I mean, it was touch and go a few times, but it was that, you know, to the measure of my aggression at the peak of my alcoholism was I punched a hole in a wall and broke all the bones in my hand, and I've still to this day, I've got metal rods in my right hand all the way through my bones, and my hand was in plaster for probably about 8 or 9 weeks, and it was just awful because I had this constant reminder of this. I had an argument with my partner at the time. I was absolutely blasted out of my face. I can't really remember that much of it, but I just remember turning around and smashing the wall as hard as I possibly could and putting a hole in it. I was in A&E that evening and till 3 o'clock, about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I remember the doctor, as he was looking at my hand, was just looking at me with disgust, really, as if to say, you're an idiot, punching a wall. It's nothing to be proud of. So I've got that scar on my hand as a nice reminder. And I'm a really placid person generally, but I've still got that the underlying anger is that I have to keep it in check, and it's going through, working the program for me enables me to have a pause button, and in AA they say that God is in the pause, my higher power is in that moment where I can decide which way I'm going to go. And I still get the thoughts. It doesn't mean that the thoughts don't come to my mind. I mean, I had an altercation with somebody last year, which could have quite easily turned into something violent, and in my mind, I'd gone through all the stages of violence. The fantasy had been lived out in my head, but fortunately, I was able to just sit there, remain calm, not act on that anger, and that's the program in action for me. So I definitely can relate to this stuff and how it helps.
Yeah, and that's like the part in my brain where like the emotional part I used to listen to a lot, and that was the part that always got me in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you worked so hard this week. You deserve to go and have a nice sandwich and a bunch of beer, right? That was the emotional part.
Yeah.
The realistic part was, hey, Anon, you have a lot more work to do tomorrow. You need to probably do a couple hours of work today to get ahead. That way tomorrow's not so hard and stressful on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that through most of the part of my life, that voice was shut off completely.
Mm-hmm.
And now being sober, that voice is really loud sometimes. And sometimes I have to tell that other emotional voice to shut the fuck up. Go away. I don't need you right now. I really do. I've had arguments, and I know I sound crazy, but I mean, I've had arguments with both sides of my brain, and one side wants to go and have a sandwich and go back to my old stomping grounds. And my new side goes, you know what, Anon? That's dumb. Shut the fuck up, dude. Go home, make yourself a sandwich, throw on some music, and chill out. And that's what I do.
Well, it's like the ego versus conscious awareness, or it's like the adult talking to the child, isn't it? There's there's different philosophies and psychological models that people follow to understand what you've just said there. And essentially, it's not crazy. I mean, everybody has it. Everybody has this argument in their own mind with themselves, and when you really objectively sit down and look at that, I mean, one of the ways in which I look at that is through meditation, and I can almost completely detach from that argument and kind of watch it going on, really, in a way. And it's just the mind, like the Buddhists say, the monkey mind. It's just the mind as its own agenda, and essentially its agenda tends to be doing whatever it feels will bring you some sort of pleasure, pleasure, safety, a feeling of what's the word, like it wants satisfaction. I mean, essentially, it's craving. Really, that's what it is. It's craving it's desiring whatever it feels that it will make it happy. Whereas, the adult in you, or the conscious awareness, is that part of you that can, like you say, take a step back and go, no, this isn't right for me right now. I don't need this. What would be the mature thing to do would be X, Y, Z, and you go down that road instead. But to get to that place where there's that split between the two parts of you, takes quite a lot of work, I think.
It does, and I think the only way that I can hear that voice was being sober. And you know, a lot of my friends even said, "Hey, you don't seem like an alcoholic. You don't drink any more than I do." And I look at them, I'm like, well, it's the lack of responsibility that I've taken in my life that makes me the alcoholic.
Yeah.
I'm not taking responsibility for my actions or what I do. I am letting alcohol lead my life, and it's gone. Literally, when I turned 50, I didn't want to live anymore. Because I knew then that I wasn't happy, and I know now the only way I can be happy is to be sober. And I don't care what anyone else says, whether didn't seem like an alcoholic or didn't seem like this. I knew deep down inside that this was my major problem and it needed to be out of my life.
Well, I think a really important point to make as well is alcoholism and addiction has got nothing to do with the amount of alcohol you drink or the amount of drugs you use. It's got everything to do with what the effect that substance or behavior has on your life, and one of the phrases that we use in 12-step fellowships is, if it's costing you more than money, if your addiction is costing you more than money, then you're in the right place. And it's certainly, it cost me everything. It cost me my peace of mind for a beginning, which is the worst thing to lose. It cost me my relationships because I wasn't able to have a decent relationship. I wasn't able to contribute to the relationships, whether they be with my partner or my friendships. I wasn't able to contribute to them appropriately because I was too selfish. I was too consumed with the thoughts about me and what I wanted, and
right.
Usually things, material things, and my appearance, and whatever again, it's that ego. It's all about what the ego wants and what the ego desires. And I think that the most freeing part of sobriety for me is that I no longer have that obsessive compulsive thinking. So if I ever get to that stage, which is very, very rare these days, where my thoughts have started to become a bit obsessive, and I'm thinking, let's say, for example, I decide that I want a pair of trainers, sneakers, as you would say in your country, and that becomes an obsessive thought pattern. I know immediately that something's not right on the emotional level.
Yeah.
Whereas if I want to buy a pair of sneakers and I think, okay, I'll put that, I'll save them in my inbox, and if in 3 months' time I still want them, then I'll buy them. That's completely different. That's a mature way of dealing with buying a material thing, and usually what happens is, by the time 3 months or a couple of months comes around, I'm not interested in that particular item. And that's just one example. But I used to, in my early sobriety, I used to kind of, walk around the shopping centres, and I would compulsively buy things. In fact, I actually used to compulsively steal things in early sobriety, because I was still looking for that buzz,
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't drink anymore, I don't smoke anymore, I don't use drugs anymore, but I can still get away with stealing things. And obviously living an honest and open and sober life, that doesn't work. And I found that the guilt and the remorse would raise its ugly head again, and I would have to make amends, and I would have to go through the entire pattern of making amends for what I'd done, and it just didn't work. So obviously I wasn't going to carry on doing that. It's just too painful.
Yeah. I mean, for me right now, waking up in the morning, not feeling crippled by the thought that, oh, I can't wait to go have my drink,
Yeah.
is so freeing. You
Yeah.
know, I can actually concentrate on better and more productive things. Like, I mean, I used to set my alarm and say, wake up, you know, in like old. Now I say, wake up. It's going to be an amazing day and you're going to be productive. You
Yeah.
know, it's just it's a matter of how you look at your day and your life. And it's just like, yeah, we all struggle. We all have those same struggles. We all have the same stresses, some more than others. But it's all how we look at them at the end of the day. I mean, are they going to totally consume us and totally rip us apart, or are we just going to just go, you know what, I physically can handle this part, I can physically do this, and I'll do this like later on when I'm ready, you know? And it's just like, and that's how I view things now. And it's like, and if someone says something to me and it's like, that's your opinion. I may or may not agree with you, but I can't change that. So why would I totally get upset over something that I can't control?
Yeah, and that's a really healthy way to live your life. And on the stress thing, I mean, a certain amount of stress is actually really good for you. And to find that level at which you can, perform and, do your job and live your family life without it becoming too stressful is the ideal way to live. And then to couple that with plenty of sleep and to make sure that you got plenty of relaxation in your life, whether that's meditation or sports or whatever it is, going for a walk or whatever. That is the kind of optimal way to lead your life. It's when stress becomes even more stressful because you're not able to deal with the normal stresses of life, that using a substance or a behavior that then becomes addictive. That's how addiction essentially unfolds. It's that inability to just manage the day-to-day living. And I suppose sobriety, in whatever form it takes for you personally, is a bridge to normal living, is a bridge to be able to live a life where you can cope with whatever life throws at you. And
Yeah.
again, back to the acceptance thing, a lot of that is to do with, like you just said then, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. It doesn't mean that I have to get wrapped up in their thought processes, and I don't even necessarily have to have an opinion about their opinion. That's
Right.
I think not having an opinion the majority of the time is probably one of the most successful ways to live, because you don't then have to get wrapped up in the thought processes that are involved in opinions.
Well, yeah. I mean, then you don't really think about why did they say that, or what were they thinking really, or you don't you stop wondering what created their thought upon you, and it's like, a lot of people dwell on or think about, well, this person did this to me. Why are they doing that to me? I'm like, now that I'm in a different frame of mind, I don't even go there. I don't even take that step, because it's like,
Yeah.
they said
Yeah.
what they said. It doesn't really matter. I could take it in, take it to heart, or not, and then move on.
Well, it's like with anything, isn't it? You've got no control, as you said earlier. You've got no control over anything. You've got no control over people. You've got no control over places. You've got no control over things. And if you were to get upset because it rained one day, well, that would just be absolute insanity, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
many people do. Many people get upset by the fact of the weather, but the weather's just the weather. The weather's not doing anything to you particularly. The weather is just how it is. If you get upset by the fact that there's too much traffic on the roads, again, the traffic isn't there to piss you off. The traffic's just there because the traffic's there. So if you have that kind of view, and then you can then take that type of view onto people and say, well, Derek over there, he's not deliberately being the way he is to piss me off. He's just being himself. he can't really help it because that's just who he is, and
Yeah.
he might not be self-aware to the things that he's saying that might be irritating people. And in fact, I don't even have to have an opinion on that. I just leave him to it, and then your life becomes so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I've learned to kind of take myself out of the equation. It's just like you just transport yourself somewhere else for the moment.
Yeah.
Take yourself out of the equation. Don't make it about you. Maybe they're going through something that you don't know, and they're stressed out, and that's just their actions. And so maybe we can have a little bit more sympathy or empathy to the reason why they're being or acting that way, and then maybe we can serve them and help them understand. Maybe they it's not like this. It doesn't have to be this way, or it just puts us in a different place. And I think thinking that way helps me understand and be more empathetic for others, I think. And I just take myself out of the equation, and then I don't have to really think about it. You're not really hurting my feelings if I'm not fully invested or I've taken myself out. You know what I mean?
Well, that's real emotional intelligence, that, to be able to have that view and also to even kind of flip it on its head and be compassionate and empathetic towards people is really a beautiful way to live. And that is certainly the way that I try to live my life these days. I mean, I come across so many people in all different walks of my life that under any circumstances might irritate me, and I just always try to remember that this is just my perception of this person. Like, I might think that somebody's really irritating, whereas the next person might think this person's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just try to kind of relax into myself and just accept the person for who they are and try to enjoy whatever it is that person has got to offer. Now, that doesn't always work, and sometimes I can be disturbed by other people's kind of behaviors and way of being, but I try my best even in those circumstances to think, well, what's the compassionate viewpoint here? Like, especially usually what happens is when I get to know a person, I then tend to find that their behaviors, the way that they're behaving is because of things that happened when they were younger, which reminds me of the way I used to behave because of the things that happened to me when I was younger. So we're all in the same boat, really. We're all just doing our best, and not everybody is going to like us, and that's another thing to accept. Is I try to just remember that not everybody's going to like me, and that's okay as well.
Right.
Especially putting myself out on this podcast. I mean, in the early episodes, I used to be really worried about what people might think of me, and I used to think, I used to censor myself a little bit with things with opinions that I may have, and now I just talk freely. I mean, I don't even edit the podcast anymore. I used to take bits out here and there sometimes. Now it gets recorded and it goes out as it is, and I don't even listen back to it anymore.
Yeah, I think the freeform is great. I mean, I love listening to your podcast, and I was actually like a little saddened when you wanted to take a break, but I can understand where you're coming from because your personal life may be a little bit hectic. You've got a daughter, and I mean, you're going through a lot with yourself too, and you need some time to yourself, and you can't always put yourself out there. But I am glad that you're doing this back again, and I really like podcasts for me have become some of the best things because I can listen to others and identify and find things out about myself or the way I've been thinking all of my life.
Yeah.
And to change those things little by little is so important, but to be open, I think, and to understand and want to like change and not feel, like I think the biggest stigma with everything is everyone thinks like getting help is such a bad thing. And it really, like, for me, I mean, in the beginning, yeah, it was tough because it's like we don't want to rip off those layers, and I think we're just afraid to let ourselves be vulnerable a little bit. And but I think once we are able to do that, we can really dig in and find out some of the things that we may be doing is totally wrong and not completely correct thinking or anything like that. And then we could change ourselves for the better and live a better life and be happier. And I think the fear that a lot of people have is what's holding them back. And if
Absolutely.
they're, we've had a few suicides out here, and it's rough. And I just think that the stigma behind trying to get help and the fear behind it is just holding a lot of people back. And I think if people can just realize that, just don't be afraid and ask for help, is the main thing. And I think it would help a lot of people if they can look at life that way.
I couldn't agree more. I think that, it's so important what you've just said, because the amount of people that I know that don't ask for help, and I was exactly the same, like before I came into recovery, I thought all the people that needed help, especially, Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or any of these fellowships, I just thought that they were weak, and I thought that they were weak and religious. And those were the two things that I definitely was not. And it couldn't have been further from the truth. When I eventually, came into the fellowship and started to get to know people, I realised that these are the bravest people that I'd ever met in my life. And true bravery, I was having this conversation with a friend recently, actually. I said, true bravery is being vulnerable. From the outside looking in, some people can look as though they've got it absolutely sussed, that they're strong and that they just, they've got this stoic personality and that they're really successful in business or, whatever area of their life, when actually underneath the surface they're in loads of pain and they're just motoring along at life, being successful, doing well, achieving, and it's just a mask for all the pain that's going on underneath. And they've compartmentalized it, put it in a box, shoved it away in the deepest recesses of the mind, and they don't want to go anywhere near it. And actually, to get that box out and to shine the light of awareness on it into those dark crevices, and to really open up to somebody and to trust somebody as well with your deepest, darkest secrets, not only is it super liberating, it's also really courageous, and it brings a sense of relief. Well, it brings peace of mind, because my experience of life now is that I walk around with no fear. I don't have any secrets that that are in the background lurking to jump out and catch me unaware at any point. I don't have anybody that I need to forgive. I don't have anybody that, there might be people out there that have an issue with me, but I'm not really too bothered about that because I'm accepting of that. And it's just a really nice way to live. And that doesn't mean to say that I'm perfect or that I don't still have my own neuroses and I don't still have my own issues. I mean, I talked last week on the podcast about eating sugar and using that as a fix. But again, that's something that I'm looking at, constantly looking at the areas of my life that need improving with compassion. I don't berate myself and say, oh my God, I'm a piece of shit and I need to change. I just think compassionately, like, I'll keep looking at these areas, I'll keep improving, and I'll do my best. And it's just such a nice way to live.
Yeah, like the way I view, like, because I know you have a thing with chocolates and sweets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I do too sometimes, and I can get a whole bag of like Hershey Kisses and eat them. But so what I try to do with that is like if I did something good that day, then I'll remember that, and I'll go okay, I can have 4 pieces of chocolate today.
Yeah.
But if I didn't do the thing that I was supposed to do, then you know what? I didn't get that 4 pieces of chocolate. So I kind of use it like a reward system. So, and then I think Dennis Barry is my life coach, and he kind of told me the same thing. He's like, he's like, and some of my other therapists too. They're like, so when you do something good, reward yourself with something that you may usually restrict yourself with. And so I've kind of done that. So it kind of helps. So I get my maybe 1 or 2 days a week, uh, four
That,
pieces of chocolate.
that's interesting because Dennis Berry's going to be a guest on the podcast soon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've been communicating recently, and he's going to be on my podcast, and I'm going to be on his podcast over the next few weeks. So that should be an interesting conversation.
I got his info from ODAT.
Yeah, that's she put me in touch actually. Arlena put me in touch.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's cool, man. She's she's going to be another guest soon as well. We're going to have another conversation. I mean, it's interesting because she played a big part in me bringing the podcast back actually, because I'd already decided to have a break prior to speaking with her on her podcast, and then when COVID hit, then it meant that I was at home every day anyway, so I got to spend every single day, even though I was working, at home with my daughter, and I feel as though I've been really blessed in the sense that I've had all this time with her, whereas I would have only have had a couple of weeks paternity leave. So it kind of made sense really, because not only have I had all that time with her and the rest of the family, but I was missing the conversations. I didn't realize exactly how much I was getting from having these conversations. And the last conversation I had with Arlena was just really powerful, and it made me realize, like, this is something that I really enjoy, that helps people, and that I'm good at it as well. Like I'm just happy to be open-minded and have an open conversation, and people seem to respond well to that. So I thought, why should I stop doing something that has got all these benefits and there isn't really any downside to it? I mean, the only battle that I've got going on in my mind at the moment, and I'm sure you've heard me talk about it, is just in terms of the anonymity aspect, because people like Arlena and like Dennis and other people that I've spoken to, they don't remain anonymous, whereas I chose to do that because I didn't really want to kind of mix the two aspects of my life. But now, it's getting close to potentially just, relinquishing that anonymity. But I'm not sure. The jury's still out a little bit. What kind of attracted you to the podcast initially? How did you find it?
I think it was very early in my recovery and being sober, so I knew I needed something because I wasn't going to meetings, but I was actually going to, during that time, I was going to 2 nights a week of outpatient recovery, and then I was doing my domestic violence classes, so those really helped, and I really liked being in those classes because I was able to talk and do that. So, but during the day, I needed something to keep my mind on track, and so I think I just searched you up on iTunes and or podcast stuff, and I found it, and it's just like there are a few that I listen to, and I just automatically just 100 identified with everything that you said and everything that a lot of people do say, and I continue to listen to those. There are some that I listen to like maybe once and it just doesn't hit right. But listening to like your background and everything that you've done, and listening to like even your dad's one was great. I mean, it was just like, and I haven't listened to the new ones that have come out yet. Just haven't had time. But up until you stopped, and even your dog walks were great too, because it was just, it was just like I always just needed that little bump of like just knowing that I was doing the right thing, or I felt like even though you're not talking to me personally, it felt like you were speaking to me. You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
And it just helps encourage and for me to stay and look forward to my life and what it can become, and knowing that I don't need alcohol in it to be who I am, or I don't need that. I have a personality without it, and I have a great one, and I know that now. And I don't need alcohol to bring that personality out.
Yeah, it's really sad, isn't it, that we do think that we need alcohol or drugs to enhance our personalities, because ultimately when you get to know somebody, and especially somebody who's self-aware and will actually allow you to speak, like, I mean, a conversation takes two people, so it's difficult when you come across somebody that just wants to talk at you and isn't interested in what you've got to say. But when you come across someone like yourself who's self-aware and willing to have a conversation, there's nothing nicer, really. There's nothing more human than sitting and just having a conversation. And even via this medium, I know we're not face to face, and I know you're over the other side of the world, and we don't even know each other. But we've been talking now for over an hour, and
Yeah.
it's just really fulfilling.
Yeah, and I was like, I was shocked a little bit, and I felt honored that I got your email, and I told my therapist and I told my wife, and I was like, at first I was like, I didn't, and I didn't feel like my story was, or anything that I've gone through, is any significance to anyone or would help anybody. And this feels like, for me, it's like another part of my therapy. And I love therapy, and I think therapy is one of the best things you can do. Whether it's just to have, I mean, even if you just have that one person you can just talk to and open up to, and just talk about stuff, and like we're doing right now. I mean, it's just it's so nice and refreshing to be able to like I've never seen you before in my life, and we're just, it's crazy. It's amazing to me.
Well, I think that the key to it is, and this is what I learned early on in recovery, and especially when I was doing my my education in counselling, was the importance of listening to somebody, like really listening to somebody. And if someone's listening to you, because they can recall the things that you've said and reflect that back to you. And I generally, like, the way that my makeup is, I wake up in the morning, and if I was on my own, if I didn't have a family, things are different now, but I'd wake up and the first thing I'd think about is me, and I would think about me all the way through the day. And it's just a ball of selfishness, and recovery has enabled me, like similar to what you said before about taking responsibility, it's enabled me to take on more and more responsibility, to the point where I wake up in the morning now and the first thought is my baby, my dog, the rest of my family, work, all these other responsibilities that I've got in my life. It's managing the house, cutting the lawn, all that kind of stuff that I never was even interested in, especially when I was drinking. All I wanted was fame and material possessions, and wasn't able to sit and listen to another person. I would have sat and I would have just talked at you, which I've done many times prior to recovery and in early recovery, just talked at people and dominated the conversation. And when you look back on that behavior, it's actually really quite painful. But I've obviously evolved as a person. I've done a lot of work on myself. I've changed, and it's nice to just hear a person and really connect. And that is the key. Johan Hari in his book, I think it's Lost Connections, I think it's called. He talks about connection is the solution to addiction, and I couldn't agree more. Whether that's connection to your higher power or other people or whatever, but it is connection, in all forms. And I really appreciate, the fact that you're a Patreon supporters. I appreciate that. That's great. But I appreciate more the fact that we can have this conversation, the fact that we can communicate online, and I can support you and you can support me, and it's that mutually beneficial support, which is what recovery is based on.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. I mean, there's only a few people out there that I do contribute to, and you're definitely one of them. And it's just because I agree and I want to support you, and so that way that you can continue doing this great work that you're doing. And I think a lot of people will say, especially the ones that do care, if they can only help one person, if this goes out and only helps one person, and that's all that matters. And I think that's true sincerity. And I think you're not really doing it for yourself. You're doing it as a service for others. And I think that with everything that I've learned and I've listened to, especially you, it's made me realize that I have some regrets about my life, and I have some regrets about things I've done. And I've lived a great life, and I'm going to continue to live a great life, and I'm only going to make it better. And I told my therapist this once. It took me 5 years to become one of the top-rated dart players in Boise. Imagine what I could do in 5 years as a person.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And you just having this conversation, I mean, I don't know how many people listen to this podcast. I've got absolutely no idea. I know that there's been over 5,000 downloads, but I don't know how many people actually listen to it. And it doesn't really matter how many people listen to it. The people that listen to it must be getting something from it, just simply from having these great conversations. And like in the same way you've identified, everybody else out there is identifying, and that's just amazing. And that makes it worthwhile for me. And this is the reason why I suppose I have this internal battle over the anonymity thing, because I think to myself, would it help more people if I wasn't anonymous? Like Arlena and Dennis do the YouTube videos and stuff. Would that help more people? And because I'm a member of 12-step fellowships, the anonymity aspect is supposed to be, you remain anonymous at the level of press, radio and films for the main reason, really, that if you were to relapse, if you were to, bring disrepute, I suppose, to the fellowship, that you wouldn't discourage other people from trying it. That other people might think, oh, well, it doesn't work because he was, sober for 10 years and then he had a drink. So that's kind of why I'm caught in two minds. But ultimately, I'm sure the decision will become clear at some point. And from now on, from then until now, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. It was funny because Arlena, that was the first, when I did Arlena's podcast, the ODAT Chat podcast, that was the first time that I was going to reveal myself on video. And she recorded it, and only the audio recorded and not the video.
Oh, wow.
So I think that I thought that was my higher power telling me, no, you just stay as you are. And plus, I shared about this on the last podcast as well. my ego was wrapped up in that for many, many years. You know, when I was DJing, it was my ego wanted to be famous, wanted to, you know, have the adulation that comes with being a personality in that world. And I suppose I don't want to go down that road again. You know, I don't want my ego to start getting a bit cocky and, you know, thinking I'm something more than I am. I mean, all I really want to be is just a person doing service for other people and being as honest as I can be on the podcast, so that people feel like they can be more honest in their lives. And that's really the crux of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, without the podcasts that I've listened to and the therapy, I don't think I'd be here. And the trouble that I did get, I've gone back and I've thought about it, it was my rock bottom. It was for me to realize that, hey, you need help. I was tired of my life and the way it was going, and I needed something to shake it up. And unfortunately, it was that domestic violence, and I'm working through it with my wife right now, and you know, things are the way they are. But if that never happened, I don't think I'd be here right now, because I would still be in that mindset of everything's great. I have a great job. I have a great business. I can afford the things I want to do, and nothing's ever a problem, because in my mind, I wasn't out. I mean, and especially in a lot of others' minds, I wasn't an alcoholic.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to give a shout out to your wife Emily as well, and who knows, maybe she'll be a guest on the podcast in future. And I think that's a nice way to end it. You know, is just that message of ask for help. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what route you go down, what path you go down, whether it's the counselling route or the fellowship route or smart recovery or psychedelics or whatever it is that you do in order to get some help with your addictions or your trauma or your mental health issues. Just ask for help. You know, if you don't ask for help, nothing will change.
No, and you're completely right. You're 100% right. I mean, it's if I could say anything, is just don't be afraid to ask for help, ever. I mean, it's just, in this day and age, it shouldn't be that way anymore. Especially now with like all these online like therapy classes and stuff. I mean, it's so easy to go and reach out and just go and ask for help, even if just talk to some of your best friends that can sit there and objectively just listen.
For sure, mate. Well, it's been a pleasure talking anyway, and stay in touch, and maybe in the future, maybe a year or a couple of years down the line, we can do another podcast and see how you're getting on.
Yeah, for sure. I would look forward to it.
Cool, man. Well, you stay sober and keep up the good work, and I will catch you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, brother.
You too. Have a great one.
You too, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, just look underneath the podcast at a range of links to mutual aid organisations. Please don't forget that you can support the podcast at patreon.com/lifeinrecovery, and if you go to the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk, you'll see links to all my social media and all my books. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.